The fluorescent hum of the office lights in Raleigh, North Carolina, was a familiar drone, a constant backdrop to the quiet erosion of ambition. For 12 long years, I, Calliope Monroe, or Callie as most knew me, had navigated the polished halls of Viridian Corp., a company that specialized in obscure, yet somehow vital, data analytics for various industries. At 32, I had watched countless colleagues, often less capable, ascend the corporate ladder while I remained meticulously competent, perpetually overlooked. My contributions, always solid, always delivered, were frequently met with a patronizing nod from management, a faint, almost imperceptible pat on the head. My well of patience was not endless, merely deep. I was, by nature, an observant person. It was a trait honed over years of needing to anticipate the next unreasonable demand, the next subtle slight. I saw the micro-expressions, the shifts in power dynamics, the unspoken agreements that governed our corporate ecosystem. This observation wasn't born of cynicism, but a desperate need to understand the labyrinth I was trapped within. My ambition was a quiet furnace, burning steadily beneath a calm exterior, fueled by years of underappreciated effort. I wanted to contribute, to truly make an impact, but every pathway seemed blocked by a seemingly insurmountable wall of condescending management and entrenched mediocrity. The air in the office often felt thick with unacknowledged potential, mine included. Then came Mr. Silas. His promotion to head of product development had been announced with the usual corporate fanfare, an email brimming with buzzwords like synergy and transformative leadership. From day one, it was clear he was a different breed of obstacle. He strutted, not walked. He barked, not spoke. His every action screamed, "I have power and you do not." He embodied everything I had come to quietly resent about the company's internal structure, the promotion of ego over expertise, posturing over performance. He wasn't just a boss, he was a symptom of the very power structures that had stifled my own career progression, an undeniable representation of the ceiling I seemed unable to break through. My curiosity was piqued, however, by Lena. Lena, one of the software engineers, was a whirlwind of focused energy, usually. She had a strict lunch schedule from noon to 1, a sacred hour she guarded fiercely. Like me, she didn't eat breakfast, relying on that midday meal as her primary fuel. Her calendar was always meticulously blocked, a green fortress against the encroachment of corporate demands. I watched her intrigued as her posture became a little stiffer, her jaw a little tighter, whenever a new meeting invite landed squarely in her sacred lunch hour. It wasn't just an inconvenience for her, it was a violation. The first time Mr. Silas scheduled a meeting during Lena's lunch, I saw her sigh, a barely audible puff of air, but loaded with resignation. She attended, of course, her expression a blank mask of compliance. It happened again a few days later, then a third time. It started as a trickle, then became a steady drip, drip, drip. Each time I observed Lena's controlled fury, a silent storm brewing behind her eyes. My own empathy stirred. I knew that feeling, the quiet rage that builds when your boundaries are casually trampled. It made me wonder what would happen if someone, just one person, decided not to let it slide. It made me wonder what it would take for someone to finally push back, to truly disrupt the carefully constructed facade of corporate decorum. I found myself thinking, this is becoming a pattern, isn't it? And with that thought, a flicker of intrigue ignited within me. The confrontation, when it finally happened, was as predictable as it was infuriating. Lena, her voice deceptively calm, had pushed back. She had reminded Mr. Silas that these meetings were consistently scheduled during her protected break. His response, delivered with a dismissive wave of his hand, had been a line I had heard countless times from countless superiors. Well, we all have to make sacrifices sometimes. I watched Lena's face, her eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. A slow, chilling smile touched her lips. She simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement that the gauntlet had been thrown. It was then, observing her quiet acceptance of the challenge, that I felt a profound sense of anticipation. Something was about to change. I didn't know what, but I knew it would be significant, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I wanted to see it unfold. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. The very next meeting, scheduled by Mr. Silas, predictably smack in the middle of Lena's lunch hour, was a revelation. When Lena's camera flickered on, I almost gasped. She was there, not just present, but prepared. Before her, a full plate of spaghetti and meatballs steamed gently. The rich aroma, even through the digital ether, seemed to waft through the air, a phantom culinary assault on the senses. With her microphone unmuted, she began to eat, the soft slurp of noodles and the rhythmic chew of meat echoing through the virtual conference room. Her camera was on, and occasionally she would offer a thumbs up, her mouth full, a string of pasta dangling precariously from her chin. The sheer audacity of it, the quiet defiance, was intoxicating. My initial concern for her job security quickly morphed into a growing admiration. This was not just a coworker. This was a potential blueprint for dismantling the very power structures that had stifled my own career progression. Mr. Silas, predictably, looked utterly bewildered. His face, usually a mask of smug authority, contorted into a series of increasingly uncomfortable expressions. He cleared his throat, he shifted in his seat, he tried to ignore it. But the persistent sounds of Lena's very public meal, the visual spectacle of her enjoying her lunch with unyielding determination, proved impossible to ignore. Other colleagues, initially stunned, began to exchange quick, knowing glances in the smaller side windows of the video call. A few suppressed smiles, others looked away, trying to maintain an air of professional indifference, but the tension was palpable, thick with unspoken amusement and a flicker of rebellious satisfaction. I, of course, kept my own camera off, but my gaze was glued to Lena, my mind racing with possibilities. Days later, the pattern repeated. Another meeting, another stolen lunch. This time, Lena brought sticky wings. The tearing sound of meat from bone, the loud smacking, the occasional triumphant crunch, it was a symphony of culinary rebellion. The sticky residue gleamed on her fingers, and she licked them with a theatrical flourish that made Mr. Silas visibly wince. The following week, it was pizza, glorious slices disappearing with satisfying squelches of cheese and crust. Each food choice seemed to be carefully calculated for maximum auditory and visual disruption, a silent protest amplified by the mundane setting of a corporate Zoom call. The silence from Mr. Silas on the matter was deafening for a while, a testament to his sheer disbelief, but the pressure had to build. Finally, after the pizza incident, his voice tight with barely contained frustration, he asked, "Do you have to eat during the meeting?" Lena, without missing a beat, still chewing, looked directly into the camera, a sweet, innocent smile on her face. Her voice, slightly muffled by a mouthful of pepperoni, carried the weight of 1,000 suppressed grievances as she delivered the perfect, devastating retort. "We all have to make sacrifices sometimes." It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph, a perfect mirroring of his own condescending words. The irony was a sharp, beautiful knife, and it was twisting perfectly. For the rest of that week, miraculously, no meetings were scheduled during Lena's lunch hour. A small victory, yes, but a victory nonetheless. The office buzzed with a muted energy, a sense of something having shifted. Lena became a quiet legend, a symbol of defiance against the petty tyrannies of corporate life. She had shown us all that there was a way to push back, a blueprint for disruption. My observant nature had paid off. I had seen the seed of rebellion planted, watched it sprout, and I felt a stirring in my own long-dormant desire for vindication. My role, I realized, was not to be the first shot fired, but to be the quiet catalyst, the inspired ally who would take this blueprint and apply it to a much larger canvas, one that involved dismantling the very structures that had held me back for so long. The Reddit updates from Lena, which quickly circulated through the office Slack channels like wildfire, only fueled the growing legend. 3 awards, wow, thank you so much, I'll eat something crunchy next just for you. Then 4th award, okay fine, next meeting I'm bringing sushi and miso soup with slurping. The sheer audacity, the escalating stakes, it was a masterclass in passive aggression turned performance art. I studied her tactics not just for their entertainment value, but for their strategic implications. Lena's actions were dismantling the rigid, suffocating corporate decorum one noisy bite at a time. It was a beautiful thing to witness. Mr. Silas, of course, did not take this well. His face, usually an unreadable mask of corporate stoicism, now twitched with barely suppressed irritation during meetings. He would stammer, his eyes darting to Lena's screen as if expecting another culinary surprise. The meetings became a minefield of potential distractions. He tried subtle intimidation tactics, extending meeting times, assigning Lena tasks that bled into her afternoons, but Lena, fueled by her now legendary status and perhaps the growing social media fame she was accruing, remained unflappable. It escalated, as all good dramas do. Lena's Reddit updates grew wilder, more ambitious. 5th award. Holy moly, you people are unhinged and I love it. I guess it's time for crab legs. And then, 6th award, what is happening? I'm bringing a fondue pot, not joking. I'm heating cheese mid-meeting. The imagination and sheer commitment were astounding. I found myself anticipating the next meeting with a thrill that bordered on glee. This wasn't just entertainment. It was a living, breathing case study in how to reclaim power from those who wielded it carelessly. My role as the quiet catalyst and inspired ally began to solidify. I wasn't just observing, I was learning, adapting. My resourcefulness kicked in. I started subtly encouraging Lena, sending her anonymous gifts of exotic spices, gourmet ingredients, or even small, high-quality audio equipment that would enhance her performance. I once sent her a package with an assortment of specialty cheeses and a tiny note, "For the fondue pot, make it memorable." I used a burner account and a drop-off point, ensuring no trace led back to me. It wasn't about directly participating in her theatrics, but about providing the subtle nudges, the unseen support that would allow her to push the boundaries even further. I was a ghost in the machine, whispering encouragement, amplifying the signal. Mr. Silas, growing increasingly desperate, started bringing up Lena's disruptive behavior in private team meetings. He framed it as a drain on productivity, a lack of professionalism, but his words rang hollow. Most of us saw it for what it was, a desperate attempt to reassert control over a situation that had spiraled wildly out of his grasp. The The team, initially wary, had now largely coalesced around Lena. Her antics were a shared secret, a source of rebellion that unified us against the oppressive management. We were all silently cheering her on, even those who still outwardly maintained a facade of corporate obedience. We were all in our own ways making sacrifices. The tension in the office became a tangible entity, a living thing. Every online meeting became a battleground, a performance space. Lena, meanwhile, continued her culinary tour de force, escalating with each new award. Seventh award, what? Okay, after fondue, we do a whole tomahawk steak, bone in. And I will carve it live on camera like it's a cooking show. My jaw literally dropped when I read that update, a tomahawk steak. The sheer scale of it, the commitment to the bit, was truly inspiring. It pushed me too. If Lena could be this audacious, what could I accomplish with my own brand of strategic ambition? What systemic injustices could I expose, leveraging the chaos Lena had so expertly created? My thoughts began to turn from observation to active planning, moving beyond Lena's immediate battle into my own, far deeper war. The atmosphere in the virtual office was electric. The tomahawk steak incident was a turning point. Lena indeed had a massive bone-in tomahawk steak sizzling on a portable grill just off camera. She would occasionally turn, tongs in hand, to flip it, the searing sounds punctuated by the whirring of a small, discreet fan. When it was finally cooked to perfection, she brought it front and center, carving it with surgical precision, the glistening red meat a shocking contrast to the corporate slides on screen. Mr. Silas, his face ashen, tried to forge ahead with a presentation on quarterly projections, but his voice trembled, his eyes continuously flicking to the macabre feast. It was performance art of the highest order, and it pushed the boundaries of corporate absurdity to their breaking point. Then came the rotisserie chicken meeting. Eighth award. Are you kidding me? I'm adding a rotisserie attachment. Whole chicken spinning behind me while I scream about burned on charts. We're marinating in velocity now. This was no longer just about lunch. It was an act of full-scale theatrical protest. Lena, in a bathrobe, wielding meat tongs, discussing agile metrics while a whole chicken slowly roasted behind her, was a sight none of us would ever forget. The absurdity was amplified, and with it, Mr. Silas's unraveling. He became more agitated, more prone to outbursts, his authority visibly eroding with each new culinary spectacle. The subtle power structures, the ones I had identified as stifling, were beginning to crack under the weight of this delicious, chaotic resistance. My role as an ally deepened. I started feeding Lena subtle pieces of information. For instance, I'd accidentally share a corporate policy document about professional conduct in remote settings that contained a glaring loophole regarding background visuals or ambient noise. Or I'd casually mention in a team chat about Zoom etiquette, a new high-quality microphone I'd heard about, knowing Lena would pick up on the hint to enhance her audiovisual experience. My resourcefulness was focused on enabling her, providing her the tools and the legalish cover she needed to escalate her performance without directly incriminating myself. My ambition was not just to observe, but to participate, albeit from the shadows, in the dismantling of the existing order. The internal corporate message boards, usually dry and bureaucratic, suddenly became a battleground of anonymous comments and thinly veiled discussions about work-life balance and employee well-being. There were clear factions forming, some defending Mr. Silas's right to demand professionalism, others championing Lena's defiance as a symbol of overdue change. I, of course, contributed to the latter, posting insightful, strategically worded arguments under a pseudonym, subtly nudging the conversation towards the systemic issues of overwork and micromanagement that Lena's actions had so brilliantly illuminated. My words were designed to subtly fan the flames of discontent, to make others question the status quo, and to show them that they were not alone in their frustrations. The hibachi grill meeting was the grand crescendo of Lena's solo act. Ninth award, you monsters. Fine. All right, no more playing. I'm sourcing a miniature hibachi grill. I'm doing full hibachi chef cosplay. There will be onion volcanoes. There will be fire. The sheer audacity of this sent shockwaves through the virtual office. It was no longer just food. It was a full-blown culinary experience, complete with pyrotechnics. Mr. Silas, looking as though he'd aged 10 years, could barely string a sentence together. The meeting devolved into a spectacle of sizzling meat, onion rings arranged into miniature volcanoes, and the satisfying whoosh of small flames. Lena, in a chef's hat, would occasionally glance at the camera with a mischievous grin, her chopsticks poised. This was the rock bottom for Mr. Silas's authority, and it created a profound moment of emotional devastation for him, but a powerful catalyst for me. Lena's actions, while glorious, were also becoming increasingly risky. Rumors of HR involvement, of disciplinary action, began to circulate more openly. My consuming anger at the system, at the injustice, reached a boiling point. Lena had provided the blueprint, the method for disruption, but her fight was individual. My fight, I realized, needed to be systemic. I wasn't just interested in embarrassing Mr. Silas. I wanted to dismantle the very power structures that allowed people like him to thrive, to consistently stifle ambitious, competent people like me. My years of underappreciated contributions flashed before my eyes, each ignored suggestion, each condescending comment, each passed over promotion, solidifying my resolve. This was no longer just about Lena's lunch. It was about my career, my dignity, and the future of every silenced voice in that organization. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. The metaphorical phoenix of my ambition rose from the ashes of corporate despair. The rock bottom for Mr. Silas was my moment of profound clarity. Watching his utter humiliation during Lena's hibachi performance, hearing the whispers of HR investigations and the very real threat to Lena's job solidified my resolve. Lena had shown the way. Audacious defiance could indeed chip away at oppressive power, but her approach, while brilliant for individual vindication, was reactive. My revenge, fueled by years of stifled ambition and underappreciated contributions, had to be strategically proactive, a surgical strike at the very structures that had allowed Mr. Silas to thrive and had held me back. My mind, usually a quiet repository of observations, transformed into a buzzing hive of intricate plans. My strategic ambition, long dormant under the weight of corporate complacency, flared to life. I wasn't going to bring food to a meeting. I was going to bring down the whole rotten edifice that had kept people like me in the shadows. The blueprint Lena provided was simple: create undeniable, uncomfortable chaos that forced confrontation and exposed vulnerabilities. My twist: I would direct that chaos not at a specific meeting, but at the very heart of the power structure, using their own tools against them. My target wasn't just Mr. Silas, but the entire complacent senior leadership team that had enabled his tyranny, turning a blind eye to his power tripping because he delivered results, however superficially. My plan had three main pillars, each leveraging my key traits: observation, resourcefulness, and strategic ambition. Pillar 1, the data dumps and the whispers. My observant nature had allowed me to accumulate an astonishing amount of information over the years. I knew where all the skeletons were buried, not just about Mr. Silas's incompetence, but about a wider pattern of questionable decisions made by other senior managers. Decisions that led to costly errors, overlooked talent, and ultimately stagnated growth for the company, all hidden behind layers of corporate jargon and carefully curated quarterly reports. I had meticulously documented these instances, not out of malice, but out of a deep-seated need for accuracy, a quiet protest against the whitewashing of facts. I had screenshots, email chains, and meeting notes all filed away in a secure, encrypted personal drive. My first move was subtle, designed to sow seeds of doubt. I started anonymously, leaking very specific, seemingly innocuous data points to a network of trusted mid-level managers and long-term employees whom I knew felt the same simmering resentment. These weren't damning revelations on their own, but pieces of a larger puzzle. For instance, I'd email an anonymous spreadsheet detailing a slight but consistent underperformance of a project managed by a different senior director, a project Mr. Silas had heavily championed. Or an internal memo about a software bug that had been dismissed as minor but had quietly cost the company a significant amount in client goodwill. I disguised these leaks as accidental attachments in group emails or as found files on shared drives, knowing my resourceful colleagues would pick up on the breadcrumbs. The whispers started. Did you see that anomaly? Something feels off. Pillar 2, the unseen hand of collaboration. My ambition wasn't about individual glory, it was about systemic change. I needed allies, even if they didn't know I was their orchestrator. I subtly connected key individuals in different departments who, unknown to each other, held pieces of the puzzle I was assembling. For example, I'd forward a question from a junior analyst in finance about a budget discrepancy to a manager in operations who I knew had previously raised similar concerns about that specific project. I did this under the guise of connecting the dots for cross-departmental efficiency, but my true goal was to foster organic, bottom-up scrutiny of senior leadership decisions. I also used Lena's chaos as cover. As the office was consumed by the latest food-related incident, the 10th award, what is wrong with you people? Now I have to flambe something live. I don't even know what yet, maybe bananas, maybe my resignation letter. There will be a smoke alarm and I will not be muting my mic. I was busy in the background. While everyone was distracted by the prospect of a flaming resignation letter, I was setting up anonymous surveys about management effectiveness that bypassed usual HR channels, distributing them through back channels and internal forums that were popular but rarely monitored. The responses were scathing, providing hard data to back up the anecdotal evidence I had been collecting. Pillar 3, the grand unveiling, a strategic ambush. The culmination of my plans centered around the annual Strategic Vision Summit, a mandatory company-wide virtual event where senior leadership presented their plans for the coming year. It was typically a bland, self-congratulatory affair designed to project an image of infallible leadership. This year, I would turn it into an arena of reckoning. My strategic ambition demanded nothing less. I had identified a critical flaw in the summit's structure, a Q&A session designed to be moderated by Mr. Silas himself, allowing him to filter out inconvenient questions. My plan was to flood the system. Weeks before the summit, I had been working on a custom script, leveraging my technical knowledge. This script would monitor the internal Q&A platform, and at a predetermined moment during Mr. Silas's moderation, it would unleash a barrage of questions, sourced from the anonymous surveys and my own compiled data. These questions weren't aggressive or accusatory. They were precise, data-driven, and designed to expose specific instances of mismanagement and the resultant financial impact. For instance, instead of "Why is Mr. Silas incompetent?" a question would be, regarding Project Chimera's Q3 performance, can the leadership team clarify the discrepancy between projected revenue slide 7 and actualized revenue internal report alpha 7 that resulted in a 12% shortfall? What measures are being taken to address the 38% turnover rate within that project team? Another, with the recent decline in employee morale, particularly among the product development and engineering teams, referencing internal survey Voice of Veridian 2023, what specific steps will be implemented beyond standard HR protocols to rebuild trust and address the root causes of micromanagement and stifled innovation? Each question was a poisoned arrow, perfectly aimed, impossible to dismiss without revealing either ignorance or culpability. The day of the summit arrived. Lena, true to her word, had brought a backyard barbecue smoker with disco lights and a fog machine, delivering sprint updates in a bathrobe while wielding meat tongs. The entire company was captivated by the spectacle. Mr. Silas, already a nervous wreck from weeks of escalating food-based assaults, was barely coherent as he started the Q&A session. And then I pressed enter. The Q&A chat exploded. Not with random chatter, but with a torrent of meticulously crafted, highly specific, and damning questions. My script worked flawlessly, flooding the moderation queue faster than Mr. Silas could filter. He spluttered, his eyes wide with panic as he scrolled through the incoming questions. "We have a question here about Project Chimera. I'll need to look into that." His voice was high-pitched, desperate. Another question immediately popped up. The Voice of Veridian survey data on employee turnover. How do we reconcile those numbers with our stated commitment to employee retention? The questions kept coming, each one drilling into a specific failure, a hidden cost, a neglected team, all pointing to systemic issues and leadership oversights that went far beyond Lena's lunch habits. The board members, watching from their own screens, initially looked confused, then increasingly alarmed. This wasn't the usual curated Q&A. This was an insurrection by data, precise and undeniable. The narrative of Mr. Silas's professionalism was unraveling, replaced by a narrative of widespread managerial incompetence and a deeply unhealthy corporate culture. The grand payoff was swift and brutal. The summit devolved into chaos. Mr. Silas, unable to control the flood of uncomfortable truths, eventually shut down the Q&A, his face flushed with shame and fury. But the damage was done. The questions hung in the air, echoing in the minds of every employee. The higher-ups, now forced to acknowledge the widespread discontent and the very real data backing it up, couldn't ignore it. The discrete, data-driven leaks I had initiated had already primed key mid-level managers and board members to receive these questions with skepticism, not dismissiveness. They started asking their own pointed questions. Within 2 weeks, an external audit was announced, focusing specifically on operational efficiency and internal team dynamics, a direct result of the summit debacle. Mr. Silas was placed on administrative leave, a corporate euphemism for a quiet firing. His reign of condescending power ended not by a stake, but by 1,000 meticulously placed informational arrows. But the consequences didn't stop there. The audit revealed deeper issues, exposing a series of poor decisions by other senior leaders who had allowed Mr. Silas to operate unchecked, who had dismissed employee feedback, and who had created the very atmosphere that stifled innovation and talent. Several more high-ranking executives quietly retired or pursued other opportunities. The power structures, indeed, began to dismantle. As for Lena, she was given a formal warning, but her public support and her newfound social media celebrity status, fueled by the Reddit updates, which I, of course, had subtly encouraged others to share internally, made a full termination impossible without a public relations nightmare. She was transferred to a new team, under a new, much more enlightened manager, and her lunch hour was, once again, sacred. She had opened the door and I had walked through it, leaving a trail of data-driven destruction. My own resolution was bittersweet, yet deeply satisfying. The company culture began to shift. There was a newfound emphasis on transparency, on listening to employee feedback, on promoting from within based on merit, not just blind loyalty. The air felt lighter. I still worked at Veridian Corp, but the ceiling felt a little higher, the pathways a little clearer. I found myself finally given the responsibilities and recognition I had quietly yearned for, my contributions finally seen for their true value. I hadn't sought personal glory, only justice and the dismantling of the oppressive system. And in that I had succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. The final twist, months later, as I sat in a new, much more collaborative leadership meeting discussing a complex strategic initiative that I was now leading, an email popped up. It was from Lena. Hey Callie, it read, just saw the news about Sila's and the audit results. I kept getting these random packages of gourmet food and weirdly helpful tech tips during my performance art phase, and those anonymous survey links that were way too specific. I never figured out who it was, but thank you. Whoever you are, you're a legend. You turned my chaos into something real. I smiled, a genuine, wide smile that reached my eyes. She still didn't know, and she never would. My revenge wasn't about public recognition. It was about the silent, profound satisfaction of watching the true power structures crumble, quietly, strategically, one data point at a time. It was a victory I would savor, a quiet vindication for years of underappreciated contributions. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.